Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson, author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solo and Creative and Encore Entrepreneurs. It's my mission to help solos, those of you in one-person businesses, understand and apply the 7 solo business principles to your enterprises so that you can find financial success. What I know is that solo businesses are distinctly different from traditional businesses, and there are some things you must do if you are going to find financial success as a solo. Otherwise, you're just going to run around and do lots of stuff that you shouldn't be doing and not be charging enough money and not have enough time to earn the money for the good work that you do. So really, I want you to check out the principles of Better, Smarter, Richer if you're interested in more financial success for your business. Go to my website, bettersmarterricher.com. You can download my free ebook. You can check into the podcasts on these radio shows that we've been doing, which are so wonderful. Sign up for the free newsletter and join the conversation on the blog. Love to have you do that. So today's guest, for his 3rd appearance on the Better, Smarter, Richer show podcast, we're talking once again to consultant Doug Lundrigan of Lighthouse for Business Consulting. Listeners, you know we've had a long discussion about what traits define the culture of the 21st century organization, the new businesses that many encores, those over 50, who are seeking employment with those organizations, or these are the organizations to whom they want to become coaches and consultants. So we need to learn about these organizations where we want to work. We've discussed 12 specific traits and characteristics of these organizations, and if you've not been tuning into the earlier shows, you can listen to the podcasts on iTunes, bettersmarterricher.com, or on soloproradio.com. They're really quite interesting and quite enlightening. Today is our 3rd conversation, and Doug and I are going to discuss the single overarching principle of all the characteristics of modern businesses, and that is emotional intelligence. No matter how we slice and dice the attributes of today's modern business culture, it comes down to emotional intelligence. You may say, what is that? Well, emotional intelligence is something we all have and something that can make a happier life if we can get more of it. Unlike those rich, fattening foods, chocolate, and certain beverages, there's no such thing as too much emotional intelligence. A lack of it can hold us back in business, and an abundance of it can give us a deep sense of satisfaction and well-being in everything that we do. Just so you know, we're calling these shows The Evolution of Workplace Culture, a Baby Boomer's Guide. So hello, Doug.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me on your program.
Well, it's nice to have you back. We've been having quite an exciting discussion, if you ask me, and I'm eager to talk about emotional intelligence today. So what do you mean by the term emotional intelligence? What is it?
You know, I really love talking about this because it is so pertinent to our business and our personal lives. 30 years ago, the term soft skills was used a lot, and it's still used today, but it's now becoming sort of interchangeable with the term emotional intelligence. And more specifically, we could, when you measure it, we call it emotional intelligence quotient, or EIQ. But it's a broader term. It includes more than just soft skills. In fact, the researchers and scientists that figure this stuff out have come up with 27 different measurable traits in 5 different categories regarding emotional intelligence. And some people use the term EQ as an abbreviation. The Q means quotient, or in other words, how we stack up to others or the average of the population. So when you hear somebody say the Q on their emotional intelligence quotient, you know that we're talking about a measurement of emotional intelligence as compared to averages. It's kind of like IQ, where your IQ, if it's 100, that means that you're dead on par with the average of your peers. And emotional intelligence measurement is about the same. But I personally prefer the term agility to intelligence. Yeah, it's a little bit different than intelligence because intelligence refers to the knowledge of it, but agility kind of infers an ability to act with balance and accuracy and speed not just to know it. And so an example of that would be I might know that I shouldn't get angry at my coworkers, for example, but I can't help myself and I do anyway. So I might be emotionally intelligent but not emotionally agile because I'm not putting my intelligence into action.
I like that. I like that. That's very good. And I like that you're saying that just knowing about it is not enough. We have to practice it. We have to be living it, is what you're telling us.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you want to dig a little deeper into that? I know when we originally talked about that, you were telling me that some of the categories were self-awareness and then self-management breaks down in emotional intelligence, if you wanted to talk about it a little more in depth.
Yeah, those 27 different traits that I mentioned are in these 5 categories. And the categories are, like you mentioned, self-awareness and self-management, and then moving outside yourself to others, being aware of others' emotions and being able to manage others, that is to say influence others. And then the 5th category is general mood. So, are you a happy person or look on the bright side of things versus somebody who's more pessimistic, glass half empty type of person. So, and I think one of the most important concepts behind these categories is that they are sort of stacking on one another as far as the ability to use one. So I guess that's not very clear. Let me try to say that another way. If you don't have good self-awareness, you're not going to be able to have good self-management. So your self-awareness might limit you on your self-management. But if you have good self-awareness and good self-management, but you're not very aware of others, then you're not going to be able to influence others very well. So sort of stack up one on top of each other where if you don't have a good baseline of good self-awareness, you're not going to have good self-management and so on, and conveying that to outside yourself as well, to others.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that really makes a tremendous amount of sense when you talk about it that way. And it sounds like, as these come in order as a stack, as you call it, that this looks to me like a maturation process, that you become aware of yourself and how you're acting, and then you be able to manage rather than react to everything that happens to you. You be able to take charge of what you're doing yourself, and you can manage your reactions. You don't always have to express them. You can manage what you're doing, and then you say, okay, here I am, and I know about myself, though this is what must be going on for other people. I can see it by their body language, or their change in color of their skin, or by their eye twitches, or things that they're doing that I have had impact on other people. And then how do I manage how I'm influencing other people, so I don't necessarily barge in like a bull in a china closet, but rather I choose my time, and I choose my words, and I choose my situation when I'm going to bring something up. It's like the old adage of praise in public and give correction in private. That you choose when you do things so that you can manage how you influence others, and then coming up to general mood. So is that kind of how you liken it? As this is like how people mature?
Exactly. You have really hit an important point there. Is in the scientific studies behind emotional intelligence, they have looked at demographic differences to try to figure out, does somebody's socioeconomic status make a difference in their EIQ, their educational status, their gender, their race, what are the differences in emotional intelligence? And really the most compelling and largest difference in people is not gender, as a lot of people might think, or even how wealthy you are or how well educated. It is your age. And it is.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah. So we baby boomers ought to be the most emotionally intelligent people out there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Except the generation before us.
They should be. They should be. What comes up for me, I don't know if this is in the scope of our discussion today, but what comes up for me is if that's a should, because baby boomers or people over 50 are, the ones that have the most life experience, maybe there's a group of people who don't display this enough or are so under distress because they can't find work. They're out of work and they don't know what to do. I'm encouraging them to start a business, but they also are job seekers. Maybe they're under such financial and emotional distress because of their work situation that they've regressed, okay, and they've forgotten how to display and how to be these various different stages of emotional intelligence. I don't know if that's true or if I'm making that up, but it seems kind of that could happen.
Jackie, you're really stating something that's on the cutting edge of this kind of research. So, wow, you're so bright on that. People do, it's not a steady progression through life. They do have times of, catastrophic events in their lives, whether it's, death of a loved one or, personal health issues, facing death with cancer or something like that, or loss of a long-time career. These kinds of events can absolutely cause us to regress in our emotional intelligence. And that's manifest in people that we know every day, and maybe even ourselves, where we felt confident before, we felt sort of in charge and able to control our surroundings and the results of our work and get a lot of great stuff done and have great connections with our coworkers and feel really good about life. And those are all things that people who are emotionally intelligent have. And then something happens that blows it all up, makes it all, go away or be greatly diminished, and we feel a lot less confident and like we have a harder time making those connections with the people that we care about. That happens to people. And just this morning I was talking with somebody that was telling me about a woman in her 60s who was acting so immature and like a teenager in some of her approach to being victimized and blaming others, and these are all emotionally unintelligent things to do. And we talked about how this person didn't used to be like that. And what happened? There must have been something in her life that caused her to feel that way and to start to act that way. So yes, we can absolutely lose emotional intelligence under conditions of stress and great, catastrophe in our lives.
Well, we regress, it sounds like. Under not necessarily, but under extreme pressure, we can go back and regress. And for people at in the later years of life, maybe that depression that so many people have ties to the concept. I've had a guest on the show who writes about grieving and being a grief counselor, and she said to me on the show, she said, the biggest secret in America is that we're going to die. And, I'm thinking that when there's one of these awful death of something events, the loss of a loved one, the loss of money, loss of career, loss of position, or even facing the ultimate loss of life, that people could very easily, because they haven't integrated that into learning how to be emotionally intelligent, they could regress. Wow, I like that. That's very interesting. So I know that Daniel Goleman, for our listeners, it's Goleman, who's the author of Emotional Intelligence and the person who talked about this concept, he said that EQ is definitely more important than IQ. Can you talk about some examples of that being true in your consulting business? What are some of the things that you've seen around that?
Probably in addition to you and me, our listeners have known people who get promoted, and because they were really good at their job, maybe it was a technical type of job or maybe it was a salesperson who was really good at selling, and now they're promoted to manage, and it requires a different set of skills, and it will require more emotional intelligence than before. So they might have a lot of intelligence about, say, the products that they're selling, and they might have a lot of ability to understand, a lot of technical things. But there's a lot of research behind the fact that emotional intelligence is the strongest predictor of success in the workplace. In fact, there was a study by Bar-On, that's B-A-R-O-N, and others, where it was a meta-analysis of 200 other studies. So they took 200 studies worldwide about this phenomenon of emotional intelligence in the workplace, and they analyzed the data to see if there was a correlation between success and high EIQ. And they found that for general occupational success, the correlation is about 0.52. So that's 1 being a perfect correlation and 0.52 being like a 52% correlation. For leadership and management type positions, that correlation jumps to 0.74 or 74%. And what that compares to with IQ, general intelligence, is the best study to correlate IQ with job success has shown a 25% correlation, or a 0.25. And the worst was about a 6% correlation. So at the very minimum, EIQ is going to be twice as predictive of success in the workplace as IQ.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that interesting?
That's fantastic. And is it, I'm just wondering if that's why so many people talk about fit. That maybe this is what they're really talking about when they're talking about the fit of an employee or of a coach or a consultant. Today, in today's workforce where so much work is, you hold a personal portfolio of experiences, and you go seek a gig, whether you're on the payroll or not, and you seek a gig to do a certain type of work that fits the company's needs relative to your portfolio. So I could see why fit would be much more than just your skills. Your fit would also be your EIQ in able to come into an organization and do the job you were hired to do. As I say, it doesn't matter which way you were hired, whether you were hired as an employee or you were hired as a consultant. You still need to come in and not only have the skill set, but have the EIQ to get that job done. Fit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree completely with that. Fit, I think when people talk about, is this person the right fit, they're talking about, do they fit into our culture? And culture, as we've talked about before, is really intimately related to the emotional intelligence of people. And somebody who has greater emotional intelligence is going to be able to make connections and seem to fit into a broader range of situations. There may be somebody who has low emotional intelligence that will fit into a certain small niche. But when you have more emotional intelligence, you can make that fit. You can adapt, or you have a better ability to connect with other people so that it feels like a fit. Yeah. Talk about this mattering in the workplace. In my experience as a consultant, this is just one small example that comes up for me. We would always begin with, an assessment of the organization before we would go in and, identify what changes needed to be made, and we would interview maybe 15 to 20 people. And I used to tell my colleagues that actually the first 3 people that we interviewed, we'd have figured out exactly what was happening and what needed to be done. But we needed to interview more of that. This is an EQ sort of thing because they felt like they had to be asked. And, if we didn't ask enough people, it came across that we were imposing our solution rather than their solution.
so we would always make a point of interviewing managers and different people in different departments and a variety of people, so that we were asking enough people that they felt that they had been asked, that there was inclusion in that, and that that was going on, even though, as I say, we would have a pretty good idea of what was happening within the first 3 people that we talked to. So it seems to me that's an EQ technique that we were using.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, comparing candidates, I think you've probably had the experience that I have, is sometimes you don't know exactly why somebody seems to be the best candidate for the job, but it probably has to do with the emotional connection that we might have made, and it might not even be very apparent up front of what that was exactly, but we just feel more comfortable with one person versus another. And being that person that others feel comfortable with is sort of the result of having good EIQ.
So it's important that a candidate for work in an organization not only have these traits of emotional intelligence, but that, as you say, they have high emotional agility as well, which means that they can display those traits. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually use them, put them to use in the workplace, absolutely.
Uh-huh. So how would somebody, not only learn this, how would they learn it other than just the natural ups and downs and, vagaries of being alive and having to interact with a lot of people? They teach us things all the time. But how would they learn how to display these traits as well? How could they do this? How could they, know where they're deficient and know what they ought to do?
Well, the sort of rudimentary way to understand yourself, if you have an emotional intelligence limitation or emotional agility limitation, would be to get a list of traits that you might watch for and see if you think you have them. A more scientific approach, or more, I guess, objective approach, would be to actually take an emotional intelligence assessment test, and I offer those online. And they measure people on those 27 traits, and they measure both a person's knowledge and how they behave in certain situations by asking those questions in the assessment. So it's both about your intelligence and your actions with emotions. And so that assessment then is a good starting point to identify your limitations. And let me just say something about limitations here. I'm sure most of the listeners and yourself, you've heard of the Peter principle, right?
Right.
People will get promoted to their level of incompetence. And I think it was Peter Drucker who first came up with that several decades ago. But the Peter principle is really about emotional intelligence, because we're going to be promoted to a level that we become self-limiting because we lack something, and it's almost always going to be related to our emotional intelligence. And so taking a test to assess what your personal limitations are is really useful, because now you're aware of what you might do that could be causing your self-limiting, Peter principle, where you can't get promoted again because you're really not very good at your current job. And I've taken 3 different emotional intelligence tests, and the one that I think is the most accurate is the one that I offer now. And on that test, I'll just use myself as an example. One of the traits is called rumination, one of those 27 traits, and that's my lowest, my weakest point. And I'll use this as an example because rumination is important to have some of, but not too much of. And I have too much of it. And what rumination means is that you look back at your past experiences and you learn from them. My trouble is I go back too much, and I maybe beat myself up a little bit too much about my mistakes from the past rather than just learning from them and moving on. So that was my lowest of all of my 27 traits, and that's the one that that I'm kind of focused on trying to overcome and do better at. And so just knowing about it, I can consider it when I'm having my own personal thoughts. Am I ruminating it too much? Am I going back and dwelling on my past mistakes too much? And so another trait that somebody could have is self-confidence. Well, too much of that can lead to kind of arrogance. And so there's a balance that we all have to have in these traits. But just knowing them, being aware of them by taking an assessment test is a huge step forward in being able to address them in ourselves.
So this is right into point number one, being self-aware. And what you're saying is that the test, by bringing these out and bringing them forward to you, has made you self-aware at a level that you were not before. I'm going to call it specifically self-aware rather than generally self-aware, that you've got names for, different things that you're working on. And so when you catch yourself, expressing too much rumination or too much self-confidence, there's, this awareness of, whoops, wait a minute here. You're off the golden mean, where you don't have too little and you don't have too much. We want you in that area of, the golden mean where you're expressing it, but it isn't holding you back and it isn't hurting other people. Would that be right?
Well put. That's exactly right, Jackie.
So self-awareness, that testing does self-awareness. So, Doug, this would be a good place for you to give us your website once again so people can contact you about this self-aware or this emotional intelligence assessment.
Yeah, www.lighthouse4business.com. That's
all right.
Lighthouse4business.com. Yeah.
I hope you get a flood of hits on that, because I think this is a very interesting thing. And so we've talked about one of the ways to increase your emotional intelligence is to be self-aware, by having somebody mirror back to you how you do in a test on it. What are some other things that people can do to increase their emotional intelligence?
Well, one of the things that is really hard to do is to ask people for their honest feedback.
Oh, yes.
And, yeah, we can take a test, and that might show us some things, but how does it translate into other people's experience with us? Mm-hmm. And this is becoming, like you mentioned, being self-aware. Now we're wanting to become more aware of our effect on other people, and so we're going to ask them for feedback. Now, there might be people in our lives, both at work and at home, who want to give us feedback, but they also don't want to get into an argument or cause conflict. So don't we all do that? We hold back what we really think somebody ought to know. How often have you seen somebody with maybe broccoli stuck in their teeth? And if you know them really well, and you're a friend, you would probably say something. But if you don't know them all that well, you might be a little bit reluctant to say something. Well, the broccoli in the teeth on our emotional intelligence might be an even more sensitive issue that people just don't want to bring up, because it's almost always going to lead to some kind of conflict. But if you ask somebody and really sincerely tell them that you want to know and that you don't intend to react in a negative way about it, that gives them permission to tell you what they might already want to tell you. And so this is really closely related to what the listeners might recall is called the 360 evaluation. And 360 evaluation means, from all sides, all the way around a circle. So at work it might mean you get an evaluation from your peers, from your boss, and from your subordinates, and from your customers. And then if you do it with your loved ones at home as well, then that's a true 360. So, just asking a few questions. And I have short questionnaires that people can bring to their coworkers and loved ones that might just, if given sincerely and honestly, might open up that whole realm of the blind spots that we all have. We don't realize how we're coming across until somebody actually tells us and explains to us.
In a lot of the organizations I've worked with, one of the suggestions I make is that they try very hard to set up a learning situation, and that whenever they complete a project or an interaction or a program, whatever it is, that they stop and review it, and that they say, okay, what went on here that didn't work, and how can we make sure that we never do that again, or that we moderate it and do it in moderation, not as strongly as we did it, so that it works better. And what is it that went well, so that we can make sure that we always integrate that into our project. Is that another way that somebody, just taking that time to review, is that another way that people could be gaining, in this emotional intelligence?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you've really described a great exercise, especially in teams at work. Team situations can be so stressful, and people have strengths and weaknesses that they bring to the team, and being able to sort of debrief after something is completed and evaluate what we did well, what we did wrong, what we would do differently next time is such a valuable exercise and important to every project. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even my little companies at the SBDC, I encourage them to do that, and I'm thinking how that might apply to a baby boomer who is seeking work, where they might be able to get feedback in some way. I know that when I was in the consulting business and we would submit a proposal, that we, particularly the ones we didn't win, we would try to get the potential client to come back and review our proposal with us, so that we could find out where it wasn't strong enough, or where we had misunderstood what they'd asked, or where we didn't come across with what they were really looking for, or in other words, why did you choose someone else rather than choose us? We want to correct ourselves. And some people were really wonderful at doing that, and some people didn't want to do that, which I, in a sense, in the terms of this discussion, if they didn't want to do it, that's probably their own lack of confidence or their own weakness in their own EQ that said that they felt uncomfortable giving that kind of feedback, or coming across as being critical, and they didn't know how to manage that, so they just said, well, we're too busy, or we don't do that. So it was always helpful
absolutely.
when people would do that.
You've hit on one of the signs of a person with low EQ, is that they have trouble expressing their true opinion to others because they're afraid that it will, cause conflict or problems. And part of that's a skill that can be learned. The art of giving feedback without being offensive. That's an easy skill to learn that I teach in some of my seminars, but we're surprisingly not good at it as human beings, and that's why we're afraid of it, is because it often does lead to conflict, and so then we're afraid of it. Just exactly what you said. Yeah. Yeah,
quite a few people are conflict averse. We use a book called Crucial Conversations. I'm sure you know of it. In one of our early business training programs at the Small Business Development Center, because you can't ever get any better if you don't talk about these things, and it's helpful in teaching people, how to get down to the truth about what is really going on. And what we see so often displayed is the time when someone will speak the truth, but they'll only speak it under tremendous emotional duress, and then it comes out as a big blast, a big volcano erupting, rather than as an honest, intelligent, observant, non-critical, non-judgmental conversation. And that's also too bad that it happens that way, because then we feel like we've been, hit by the blast furnace, and we don't know how much of the truth to pick up out of that. Whereas if people can learn to give honest feedback in a non-emotional way, then everybody learns and everybody gains.
Yeah, you've just really described it wonderfully, how so often, we will hold things in. We get offended, or we see something that bothers us with a coworker or somebody at home, and we hold our feelings in because we don't want to offend, and then they do come out in an eruption, like you said, and then it is offensive, and it is awful, and it's a bad experience for everybody. Whereas the more emotionally intelligent way to handle that is to use those concepts in that book that you just mentioned, Crucial Conversations, which is all about emotional intelligence, where you have a very sincere respect and a mutual goal of finding a solution to a challenge, and you have that approach to talking with somebody, and then you deliver it in a non-offensive way that, again, can be taught and learned easily, and then it's not so bad. All of a sudden we're getting somewhere. We're not offending each other, and we're progressing, and the relationship is preserved and not damaged. So much better than the alternative.
What also comes up for me as we're talking about how can people learn this, and you can learn it with dialogue, and I'm wondering if you could also learn emotional intelligence with role-playing. I'm thinking of so many re-careering groups that I've been going and talking about Better, Smarter, Richer and Encore Entrepreneurship, and so many of them are set up as, the speaker in the front of the room pouring information out to those who attend, and then maybe you've got a little Q&A. But I'm just kind of wondering if maybe people who are seeking gainful work, as I say, to me it doesn't make a difference how you get paid, either as an employee or but they're seeking gainful work, maybe rather than focus on teaching them how to find leads through LinkedIn, we ought to say to them, why don't you do some role-playing? And because that would be a great way for people to practice some of this stuff. I'm just wondering if that would be helpful.
Oh, yeah. The workshops or seminars that I put on are rich in those kinds of interactions where it's not just about receiving information, it's about practicing and practice real situations. So, we ask people to think of a real situation, leave out individual names so that it doesn't become too personal, but real situations that you've come across that you would like to do better at, and then let's role play it and practice it. Absolutely. And behavior change cannot occur really with just knowledge alone. We can learn cognitively till we're blue in the face, but unless we're actually putting it into practice, it's not going to change the way that we actually behave. So practicing it and role-playing absolutely is important. Wow.
So what I'm thinking is that we've got, what I want to go from here in our conversation today is talk about things that people might read that would help them, increase their emotional intelligence. But maybe what we ought to be saying is we're going to talk about the books, but being that we've just said that behavior change can't happen with knowledge alone, you've got to practice. Maybe what we're saying is to our work seekers, of people who are wanting to find ways to make money in the 21st century economy, that maybe what we need to do is choose some of these books and create a reading group around the book where you read it and you discuss it and you have a conversation about what did I learn, what can I adapt, how could I bring these principles into the work that I'm doing, and again, make it more interactive. So listeners, I want you to remember that. I'm not just talking about go read this by yourself. I'm talking about read it and process it with some other people where you can, use the principles in the book or the ideas in the book to talk about how you might use some of the ideas to further your own career. Because you just said knowledge alone isn't going to change behavior. So, Doug, I'm going to move on and talk about how can we learn more about these cultural traits, and are there some books that we can be reading? You gave me some good ones. Would you like to talk about some of those?
Yeah. to deal with the new culture paradigm that is very rich in emotional intelligence, you mentioned Daniel Goleman, and he wrote that first book that talks about why emotional intelligence is more important than cognitive intelligence, or IQ. He has a more recent book called Working with Emotional Intelligence, in which the principles are more applicable to the workplace, and he focuses on those kinds of situations. And I'm rereading that right now, and it's a fantastic book. The concepts in there are just life-changing if we can put them into action. And anybody who would like to enter into a book club with me and just talk about it on a regular basis, work through it, chapter by chapter, I would love to do that. I'm working through it myself right now, but everybody has more emotional intelligence in one way or another than me. So I would love to, gain from other people's experience as well. So
that would be fabulous. That's quite an offer, listeners. I think you would gain a lot from being in a book study group with Doug on emotional intelligence. So, is it a big book? Is it is it full of examples? Is it? I haven't read that one.
It's got a lot of real-world examples, case studies. So not just hypothetical examples, but actual real-life studies or case studies, as well as the science behind it. This is one of the things I like about Daniel Goleman's writings is that it's not just his ideas; it's science-based. The best knowledge that humankind has to offer about emotional intelligence is in that book, and so this is what makes it really valuable to me. Is I feel like it's not one guy's opinion; it's a lot of scientific research behind it. So, if anybody wants to do that, please go to my website. And in the contact us field, just put your name and email and then a comment under it says, let's talk about working with emotional intelligence, or let's talk about EIQ. And I'll contact you. We can find a time. If you're not local, then we can do it over the phone. And if you're local, we can meet somewhere.
Oh, I think that's a fabulous idea. We do study groups around Better, Smarter, Richer, and actually I designed it that way. I designed it to be a fill-in-the-blanks workbook because I want people to interact with the ideas. And I had a new study group that just started yesterday, and one of the people said, these questions look simple, but they're not. I said, I know that. I'm very aware of that being true because what I want people to do is dig down underneath their reaction thinking, what is it that your business really does? You think, well, blah, blah, blah. And you think, well, wait a minute, maybe we actually sell peace of mind, or maybe we sell assurance, or maybe we sell confidence, or, those are what the products that I'm really selling, or maybe it's beauty, or, something like that. And they begin to think about it a little deeper, and it's very powerful when it works that way. And the cohorts have been just tremendous for people being able to integrate the learning and say, now I understand how this applies to me. So I think if people wanted to come with a reading group with you about Daniel Goleman's book, that's an offer you can't resist, listeners. So how about, are there others? Are there some other books you think we should be reading?
You mentioned a really important one, Crucial Conversations, and the sequel to that is Crucial Confrontations. And those concepts are all about emotional intelligence. I mean, it's part of emotional intelligence. So, but there's two others that I really loved and I found life-changing again for myself. One is called Leadership and Self-Deception, and the author is actually a group called the Arbinger Institute. And it goes through sort of an analogy of a man in a company who is he's got the old school leadership style of the industrial age where it's command and control, and he comes off gruff and he offends people and he doesn't know it. And he comes to a realization of what he's doing, and it goes through how he overcame that and how he changed the way he thinks about other people in order to be a better leader of his company. And The Hero's Choice is another one. It's called The Hero's Choice, Living from the Inside Out. And it's by Roger Allen, who's a friend of mine, and he's also one of the PhDs in organizational behavior that is an author of the training materials that I use in my business. Very intelligent man, a lot of decades of research under his belt on business and organizational design. So he wrote The Hero's Choice, which is also a story about a man who's really in a situation very similar to a lot of us baby boomers. The story is about this man who built a company, and then the board of directors fired him. He spent a couple of decades building this company, and then he was fired by the people that he originally brought in as a board of directors. And why that happened, and it came down to a lot of his emotional intelligence. Although that's not identified specifically in the book, but a lot of his skills in working with other people are what caused him to be fired. And so now he's out of a job. He's over 50, and what does he do about it now? How does he change so that he can adapt to his current situation, which is basically 180 degrees, completely opposite of what he thought it would be? So anyway, a lot of us have been or will be or are currently in this kind of a situation. And so The Hero's Choice book is one that I highly recommend.
That's fabulous. That's absolutely fabulous. And I would think that those books that you're talking about would be particularly interesting for our colleagues who are in their, 50 plus, in their mid-50s, older 50s, and, because as we're talking about, which is the basis of our conversations, that so many of them have worked in and been successful in the old paradigm, the command and control, the hierarchical business, the, it's right because I said it's right, type of business. And then as, those organizations haven't been working anymore, and as the economy turned down, a lot of that population was simply swept out. And they were swept out a lot of times on the basis of age, even though there was another reason given, since the ageism is illegal. There was a lot of just letting a whole group of people go because they're older, and they let them go partly because they didn't fit the new paradigm, and partly because they were the most expensive employees. People expect to earn more money as they work within an organization, and so it was just a good opportunity to let them go. But what, of course, the businesses lost was the knowledge that was carried around in their heads, the knowledge and experience. And if you recall last October, that's the very basis when we were talking, that's the very basis for our conversations, because those displaced workers, as we can call them, or people over 50 who have left organizations, they hold knowledge that the new businesses need, but they're reluctant to go get it if if the person who carries the knowledge does not also carry the EQ, the emotional intelligence, to work with the new workforce. That's the whole heart of the conversations that we're having, that they would rather work without the knowledge than have the knowledge come in a way that is disruptive to the business and its future workforce. They would rather do without than, not have people come in who fit the new paradigm. And I think that's quite interesting. So that's what we're talking about here, is how can knowledgeable workers go back and gain some of these skills or display some of these skills so that they once again become attractive to the businesses that so desperately need what they know.
Yes, Jackie, that's so wise what you just said. And
so
sometimes
go ahead.
They may not know why. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think they may not know why.
Yeah.
I think that's very possible that they don't know why, what happened. And I also think sometimes when people don't know why and they're struggling, that they wind up feeling very bitter about, the whole thing. Gee, I worked hard. I did what I was supposed to do. I showed up for work. I did everything I was supposed to do or was told to do for success within the company, and then they let me go. They let me go when I was 56 or 57 or 58, and now what? And what we're saying is that there is a route, and there's some things you need to do. And here's how you can do those. So,
yes.
Are there some other books you think that people should read if they've not read them yet?
There's some classics that I recommend, and I think I might have mentioned before that LinkedIn did a list for 2013 of the 10 most talked about books from all of their, subscribers. And a lot of those were really old books. How to Win Friends and Influence People, that I first read when I was 12 years old. My dad gave me a copy of that by Norman Vincent Peale. It was on the list. I couldn't believe it. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That one's, I think, even older, from the 40s or 50s. It's been revised, several times, but still a classic. And then The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was from the late 80s or early 90s, Stephen R. Covey. That's, I think, a must read. I mean, anybody in business who hasn't read that must read it. I think the language in that book is used habitually throughout every business I've ever come in contact with. Some of the terms like think win-win and sharpen the saw or sharpen the blade. Those are terms out of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that we use every day, and people seem to know what they mean, but reading that book is, I think, just essential for every business person.
I agree with you. I think particularly the Covey is, as you say, it's such a classic, and people do use the vocabulary, and they do talk about it, and it's so thought-provoking. I know, again, that he wrote another one about time management, and we use in the classes that we teach on time management as part of our Small Business Development Center program, we use his principles, which is that you focus on the important rather than on the urgent. And that's quite a lesson for us to learn because our time is so limited. I keep saying to people it's the only non-renewable resource that we have in the world, that no matter what you do with your time, you can't get more of it. And so it's very, very important that you manage your time very well. And as I say, Covey said it so well, that what you do is you focus on what's important rather than on what's urgent. So, and how about some new business classics? Do you have some more of those for us?
Yeah. I think we've mentioned in some of our conversations Good to Great by Jim Collins, and then the sequel to that is Built to Last. And what's really interesting about that book is that it identifies business leaders who took their companies from being good to being great over a long period of time, and what were the characteristics in common of those great leaders. And some of them are right along the lines that we've been talking about in emotional intelligence. And not the command and control, I'm the show, I'm the big shot type of leader, but the humble leader who looks, if things go well, they give credit to everybody else, and if things are going badly, they take on the blame for themselves. They're self-effacing. They're not self-aggrandizing. They're not trying to make themselves look great to everybody. They're just trying to be the best they can be and help everybody else be the best they can be, and then build the company. So to me, that was a groundbreaking book, Good to Great. First Break All the Rules is also, I think, a new classic because it uses the data, probably the largest business research body of all time. I don't know of anything bigger. 1 million people in business, mostly employees, 80,000 of them were managers, over a 25-year period. All of them were given a survey of 100 questions, and all of those questions put into a computer and analyzed, and they found 12 characteristics that the best workplaces have, or the most successful workers have in their workplace. And those 12 characteristics are now the foundation for many of the employee engagement surveys. I offer one of these as well for businesses. If people measure these 12 characteristics of their workplace highly, then they will be more engaged than others, and they will be more successful. And so this, to me, is a groundbreaking, must-learn kind of thing for business owners if they're going to be hiring anybody, to know how to make a workplace where their employees are fully engaged and bring the best of themselves to the workplace.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
And I think you had one more that you wanted to talk about, too.
One more is really fairly new, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey, which is the son of Stephen R. Covey. And he talks about, well, we've all experienced this. When you don't trust somebody, then you check up on them and you spend a lot of time and energy kind of worrying about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And trust has three aspects. Do you trust somebody's competency, that they can do the job well? Do you trust somebody's integrity, that they are honest with you? And do you trust somebody's, the emotional side, that they won't backstab you, or they won't hurt you emotionally? And in business, the speed of trust is more efficient when there is high trust. When you trust the people that you've hired to do their jobs well, that they will get it done, then it's a lot more efficient and fast to get things done than to have to check up and worry and go back over people's work and evaluate. And there's just a lot more stuff involved with not trusting people. So I think it's really valuable for especially this new 21st century culture, where trust does have to be a lot stronger in order to be efficient.
So, Doug, we're almost out of time, and we've really had a great conversation, I think, over these last 3 weeks. And I've learned a lot, and I think our listeners have learned a lot as well. Do you have any final words to add to this great conversation as we're bringing it to a close?
Sure. In my view, emotional intelligence is important for 3 reasons. This is why everybody should work on it in their own personal lives. And first is that it can make or break your success in business, whether you're an employee, a manager, a leader, a solopreneur, a business owner, any aspect, it can make or break you. And the second reason is it's closely related, and that comes back to what we've been talking about around culture, that the workplace culture is evolving, and that we have 12 differences in the business culture of the information age, this 21st century, and 8 of those are directly related to emotional intelligence. So that's another reason that it's important. Now, the third reason is that people with high emotional intelligence are generally happier, feel more content, and have more fulfilling personal relationships than those with low emotional intelligence quotient. So to me, that's something to seek and to strive for. And maybe a lot of your listeners are like me and would appreciate being happier and having better relationships. So those are
I'm sure they would.
Why? Yeah.
Yes. Doug, it's been just a total enjoyment on my part to have you as my guest for these last 3 weeks. And we are going to have that list of books that Doug talked about today on both of our websites. And I want to tell you again that you can find Doug at his website. His business is called Lighthouse Business Solutions, and his website is lighthouse4business.com, and his email is doug@lighthouse4business.com. And Doug, it's just been great to share your wisdom all these weeks. And you can also find that list of books and, of course, the list of those 12 characteristics, not just on Doug's website, but also on my website, bettersmarterricher.com. And I just want to remind listeners how big the population we're talking to are. The stats are that there's 100 million people over the age of 50, and fully 70% of those people say that they would like to work beyond typical retirement age of 65. And this year on this show, we're going to talk a lot about not only solopreneurship, but also to encores who are starting businesses over the age of 50. That's the fastest age group of business starters in the entire country. They're starting businesses faster than people in their 20s or 30s. And that's one of the ways that people are choosing to be active in their encore years. We're living what is being called the longevity bonus. So, listeners, I hope you will continue to listen weekly to our podcasts and join the ongoing conversation on the blog at bettersmarterricher.com, and as we talk more and more about this fabulous new way to be in the world. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that we hear from you again next week. Goodbye.